Hello, welcome everybody. Your three favorite logisticians here, bringing you our topic today on the network of the future, FedEx, UPS, new contender enters. For those of you that don't know us, we're going to just do some quick intros and then get to it. I'm Jess Wyndham, CEO of Solving Work, independent consultant in logistics and transportation space, really focusing on holistic engagements, building bandwidth, and then using that to make lasting change in your organization. I'll pass it over to John.
Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry, that was totally random. The stream started on my other screen. I apologize. So I'm John, when I'm not totally distracted by what's happening on the other screen. I am, I guess we'll call it founder and principal of Operational Innovations, which is a retailer and service provider focused logistics, consulting, or fractional support firm, really taking anything that you do and helping to make it better, whether it's cost containment or quality revenue improvements so that your business is thriving.
And Matt?
And I'm Matthew Zlotritsky, the logistics ambassador. No fancy consulting titles like the other two. I just like talking about everything logistics, everything involved in logistics. But like everybody, if you want more input or news or want to learn about stuff, I'm more than happy to connect and consult on those terms as well.
All right, Matt, you might be a listener today. Your audio is still really bad, but Matt doesn't have a fancy title like us, which is what he said, but he loves to talk logistics. So please follow him on LinkedIn and join the conversation there. All right, awesome. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. FedEx and UPS both released their quarterly earnings in the last few weeks, and one of the big topics that was discussed was Network 2.0 for FedEx and Network of the Future for UPS, and that kind of got the three of us talking about, what does this mean and what's going to happen. I'm going to throw up some slides that we can just kind of like have as reference as we go through our conversation. But maybe I'll pass it over to you, John, while I do the technical piece, and give us a little overview of what these networks mean for UPS and FedEx.
Yeah, so basically, if you've heard the name, so FedEx uses the term drive, like that's their big initiative, and then FedEx is using Network of the Future. What they're really focusing in on is basic business improvement, quality improvements, but kind of going about it in a little bit different way. FedEx, I would say, is taking a little bit more of a traditional kind of approach, very broad focus and all encompassing network optimization in different areas, everything right from how they're doing what they're doing, frequencies and things like that, right to G&A, which is obviously your head office count. Seen some of that stuff in the news. UPS, on the other hand, is really working a lot on ramping up automation and consolidation. So getting more out of each square foot, getting more out of every asset, and really trying to shrink down some of the network that they have today and get a lot more throughput for each one of the facilities that still remains to be a node. So really a similar in terms of intent and goals, obviously, when it comes to business performance and the profitability targets that they have, but taking a little bit of a different approach, one that's, let's call it a little bit more CapEx heavy when you're talking about UPS, and then FedEx, which is taking a little bit more of a standard kind of approach that would just look at, evaluating each one of their different areas of operations and seeing how they can streamline, consolidate, and tighten up what they're doing.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention in the intro is, hey, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in. We'll address them as we go. We can see those on LinkedIn. But yeah, and I think great overview, John. And one of the things that's really interesting is the reason why FedEx and UPS are doing this. Like, obviously, they're public companies. They always have to be continuing to improve the bottom line and to support their shareholders. But FedEx historically has this overlapping footprint, ground separate from express, operating separate hubs, separate pickup and delivery routes in the same footprint. And then UPS, obviously, they have this historic Teamsters contract that just they just signed last August, and their labor costs have increased dramatically where their competitors haven't. So, that's one of the reasons why they're so focused on the automation. They've got to take out some of this cost. John, do you think that the reasons or where they're starting from is going to change anything about Network 2.0 versus Network of the Future?
Um, I think where they start from is obviously always important, but I think it's obviously going to rely a lot more on where they want to go, right? Because both of them are feeling a ton of market pressure from quote unquote shippers, right? One of the biggest posts that I wrote in the last, I don't know, 6 or 8 months was really showing people, and it was from work that Pitney Bowes does about, hey, here's the U.S. parcel market, and it's 94% dominated by UPS, FedEx, USPS, and Amazon. 94% across those four players. And e-commerce and the breadth of products is only continuing to expand. You're getting this nonstop need for innovation, this sort of clamoring from the customer base to find new and different types of things. And it's really in opposition towards what UPS and FedEx is doing, right? Like everybody's heard about Shein, everybody's heard about Temu and things like that. Well, these guys are reaching just millions and millions of consumers, but their average order value, Temu or whatever, for example, is $25, and Shein right now is sitting at 75. Both of them rely on heavy discounting and price promotions to attract customers. Well, when your average order value is $25, it starts to make it really difficult for a UPS and a FedEx to continue to be that de facto service provider of choice when their average revenue per piece might sit at anywhere from, let's call it like $8 to $12. I think they typically average around 10 and a half. That becomes tough because think about what you're shipping. Who's paying 50% of the shipping cost, like of the product cost just in shipping. So I think where the market is going is really going to dictate a lot of what they choose to engage with and what they choose to not engage with. And I think that they're much more aggressively focusing on quality of revenue and profitability, as seen by the recent surcharges that they put in by the different zip codes, which now, funny enough, you're seeing some regional carriers. Nate made a really great post highlighting that this morning, that now OnTrack is following in that respect. And I had highlighted a couple of weeks ago when that came out that it's a win-win for FedEx and UPS because those areas suck to serve, and it's going to suck for anybody because no one has any real advantage over what they do. So it's like, well, you can either go at it and take it at a lower price, or you can actually thank us for the fact that we're pushing it first, and you also get to benefit because you don't have the same ability to execute the amount of orders per hour in those areas. So that kind of stuff is going to continue to shape the market, in my opinion.
And that's an interesting thing that you bring up with the regionals. One of their historic advantages was, hey, our rate cards are a lot simpler, but now they're moving away from that because again, the serving every single address coast to coast is a lot. But what I was going to say about those DAS zip codes, the delivery area surcharges, is it's not just rural America that is getting hit with these. Historically dense locations are also getting hit with these because in the past it was like a good sweet spot of volume, right? We have the density, this is saving us money. Now we have way too much density, this is costing us money.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and seeing that, and that sort of brings me to one thing. When I was looking at what UPS is doing and moving from scanning technology to sensing technology as the RFID technology gets better and better. And one of the things that they're banking on is being able to use RFID sensing inside the trucks to tell the drivers where the package is. And I'm a UPSer. That's where I started my career in logistics. And I know I used to give driver trainings and talk to them about the methods. And this has always been just historic UPS is follow the procedures, follow the methods, and we'll reduce our right turns, all of the or left turns, and all of the things that make UPS what it is. And I'm thinking about this like driver sensing technology, and that's so cool and so awesome. But then what happens when peak season hits? because these technologies are going to make us better 9 months out of the year, and maybe potentially just make us way, way worse in November and December, because I don't care how good the RFID is. When that truck is packed top to bottom, inside and out, they're not going to be able to leverage that technology in the same way. So what do you think, John, about like how bringing in more technology makes us better most of the time, but it's going to push us to the brink on peak season, and how they might, both FedEx and UPS, deal with that situation?
Yeah, no, that's like a really great point, right? And I think it comes down to, well, quality of design and what you're really designing for. You can't necessarily design everything for the exception, right? And the only time that it works. But parcel is very different in the sense that peak matters, like, for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, it really, really matters to be able to hit the black, from that, let's call it late October, right through sort of the new year. So that is really interesting. How they implement it is going to be important. Hopefully, both of them are focusing on really the only thing that matters. Because really, when you think of rural addresses and you think of urban, ultra urban, ultra dense kind of environments, you end up with the same problem. Even though one has a lot of people and the other one doesn't necessarily have a lot of people, the same issue is when it comes down to productivity. How many transactions, i.e., revenue generating touches, can I do per hour? And in the past, density was always like, well, you hit a certain density, you're going to hit the right sort of amount of transactions per hour, you're gold. But to your point, now in a lot of these markets, it's too congested. It's too dense. It's too hard to move around. So you have the people and you've got like this massive truck full of packages, and you literally just can't do it fast enough, right? Amazon is facing the same challenge. For as well as they execute and for all of the technology they pour into it, if you speak to Amazon drivers, right? And I'm not just talking about like the head DSP person, I'm talking about the actual people like in and out of the trucks. They will tell you for months just how insane it is, how the expectations are wild, and how, the design of the system and the math really doesn't feel like it aligns to what's realistically capable. And these people feel that they're just running nonstop. So how you design that system and what they're going to do. And I don't know if Andre's in there, but Andre shares with us a lot about lockers and things like that. I really do think that for that continued success and how they're going to drive forward, they're going to have to use some of these technologies and pair them in ways that are going to allow them to strategically either offload or deal with certain addresses in chunks and do things differently. Because running door to door, to your point, no matter how good that tech is, at some point the truck, you don't really have room to move, and it's like, what's right in front of me right now? I don't need to know that it could be in a nice compartment. Like, I can't even get into the truck.
Yeah. And I think, you make an awesome point. Like, the math doesn't math anymore. At a certain density, your stops per on road hour, your net delivered packages per hour, like these are, at least 20 years ago, the fundamentals of how we planned at UPS in the industrial engineering department, the math stops mathing. And it's not built for the people in the trucks doing the work, understanding the other factors that don't go into the equation, whether that's, the trucks being 110 degrees in the summer, or in the winter when we're in the midst of our peak season here in North America. And, they're just packed to the brim. So there has to be a human component, a driver forward element to everything that they're doing in the space of the automation. It's not like minimizing labor, but it should be about optimizing labor. And we'll have to see if that's, what comes. And
Well,
let's
it's
talk a little. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add to that because you made such a good point about, because we may have people that are with us today. They're like, well, what do you mean the math doesn't math? It doesn't even make sense, right? And they may have heard stories like, hey, Sheen wants people to do a package delivery for $2, and they want it, or they want it for $1. They want it this, and that stuff is happening. And the real dangerous part that people are getting into is falling into that. The math will math density trap, when, to your point, it most certainly does not. Like, you will break it even with the right amount of density, because what ends up happening is that you only have so much time. You're only going to be able to get so much done. And what I share with those sort of retailers and clients that I work with a lot is that I love this frame, and sometimes people jump on me because they say it's not the same, but I guarantee you it's more the same than you think. If you deliver a $10 no name wristwatch, or you deliver a Rolex, outside of any special conditions that you might put in there because of this, $100,000 Rolex, moving a product in a box that's about the same size from the same DC to in the same geographic area to the same customer with the same delivery expectations takes exactly the same effort from the driver. It takes the same effort to move that package from the conveyors, to get it sorted, to get it on the truck. It doesn't really matter what the internal value is. And that's the big challenge that everyone's facing now, is that everybody loves everything they can buy online. But when that internal value is dropping, the money and the revenue quality just isn't there to maintain, what they really need from a package base. And then all of a sudden, every carrier, FedEx, UPS, Amazon, whatever, are getting inundated with activity that is not profitable. And there is no density threshold that'll do it. And what a lot of regionals have been doing is that they have a couple of great domestic accounts, and then they're throwing their really bad decisions on top of it, and it still makes money, and they're like, oh, that was a great decision. It's a great decision because your domestic accounts are paying for what the other people are not. And maybe that works and you can choose to do that strategically. But sooner or later, this customer base that you have that's actually paying the bills becomes under fire. They push you for more RFPs. They're going to threaten to go to another person, or they do go to another person. And all you're left is with an activity base that's amazing in terms of density, but that absolutely doesn't do the right thing for your revenue. And that's why FedEx and UPS are so focused on quality of revenue. You can even see on the slide there for FedEx specifically, they called it out in their last investor call. They're saying, no, we're prioritizing quality of revenue and growing that actual segment. So it's really important to not only get revenue and density, but how good is that revenue that you're getting?
I don't know if you guys can hear me. Is it better now?
Oh, now you
Yeah,
are.
yes,
There you
you're
are. You're
good.
back.
Awesome. I'm back. So I was going to say one thing that I find it very interesting from a North American perspective is we always kind of look at the way we're going to truck it across. And that's why I find even Andres, like you're talking about perspective of the parcel lockers. But if you go to the more dense locations like India or China, they're doing a lot of it on foot traffic too. So we got to also think about the mode of what we're doing and how we're doing it, because there's a lot more dense populations out there. Like, how does Mexico City do all their deliveries? I'm sure not all of it is always on a truck. And we just have to really look at the mode. It might be these new regional carriers that are coming out. They're coming up with these specialized modes the FedEx and UPS might have to utilize because they can go to these uber dense locations where they pull up with the truck. Like in Canada, Purelator does these neat things where they pull up with their Purelator trucks in dense areas, and you can go down and pick up your package, or they start delivering from that truck versus a cube van, because they can
Oh,
have more packages into that space.
Definitely can. And the funny thing is that, like, just because you're bringing up places from or other activity from different parts of the world, China actually was in the news not too long ago, and their carriers were furious because they actually now are being told they have to deliver to the address on the label. If you can believe that. And that's not to say that it's not because they were doing a poor quality of service or whatever, but to your point, the way that they were able then to support this like tsunami of activity was being like, oh, these buildings, these couple of areas or whatever, we just throw all of the packages into this common area. They didn't even attempt to go to the actual door or to the specific place. And now all of a sudden it's like, yeah, but guys, like we built our models on this benefit, and like we don't have enough time to do that. So to your point, I think that there's a ton of alternatives that people can use. But I think it's an interesting spot because it's going to have to actually be a bit of a collaborative effort, not only between the service provider, whether it's a UPS, FedEx, Amazon, or a smaller regional partner, but it also is going to have to come from retailers, because like you can't have it all. You can't want to use all of these different modes to get to market, but then say, but everything still has to be done within like 2 days from the time the customer hit buy. Because if that's getting the order, pick, pack, ship, move it to the local market, get it to the delivery provider, from the delivery provider to the final mile. It may not be as realistic if you're going to really explore a host of different alternatives. Today, we're able to do that. And what you're seeing now is the system is breaking because it
Yeah.
can't it can't handle what keeps coming at it.
We were just talking about that. How do you get something from the west coast of the North America to the east coast in 1 day delivery if FedEx doesn't have an overnight plane and have it delivered right to door? It's near impossible. Truck takes a few days. You can't do it, and there's not enough regional players to support that activity to make it feasible and work. So might be that the next day delivery promise might be an exclusive promise, and we move into like that 3-4 is more reasonable versus next day.
Well,
And,
for sure.
just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. Like, not every.
Or the consumer wants it.
Well, yeah, and like, again, and I think we've all talked about this, is like, what the consumer wants is to know when their package is going to arrive, and so we'll default to getting it the next day or in 2 days to know for sure I'll have it by this date. But if we can get better at meeting our estimated delivery dates, then we can change the perception from the 2-day to the exact day. And that's one way to get around the porch pirates. The other way, and this is a comment that Jennifer has put into the chat here, is pick up locations in difficult areas, how to encourage people to use that option. I know I saw some checkout technology recently where the default is pickup. And if we can start to change consumer behavior to say, hey, if you'll pick up at a specific location using a parcel locker or a UPS store or a FedEx office location, or Whole Foods for Amazon, you can pick up your packages there. Or the post office, hey, that's a win-win for the carrier, for the brand, and for the customer, because we know that we can get it delivered at that particular time and it will be a safe transaction. Whereas a lot of folks don't have a safe transaction delivery location.
So, but
rural
this is
or urban.
But this is an interesting point, right? And it's like, how do you get away with it? And this is something I don't know when I was sharing this, but I think Matt, you and I definitely talked about this too. But like, the idea of the challenge now that we have in the market is that, hey, you give me delivery for free. I can order a pen and I will get it for free. So why would I want to pick up? And the funny thing that I find with this is that you still have these offers. And I mean, this is just common sense to me. I honestly don't get why this even happens for a lot of retailers, but it's like, hey, Mr. Customer, you can buy this pen and I will have it shipped to your door in a day or two, and it's free. Or you can go out of your way and it's still free and you're going to pay the same, but you have to go do the work. Like, what do you honestly expect people to choose? They're going to be like, well, then just deliver it. Because especially in North America, unlike, a lot of the activity that happens in Europe and Asia, is that if they leave it on our door and someone picks it up, we just get to make a claim. And 99% of the time, the vendor or whatever will just send it again. Like, they're going to send you a replacement and they eat the costs. So what I often suggest is that if you really want to change behavior, incent people to do something differently. It's like, I've got $1 billion of returns and lost product and all kinds of different things over here. It's like, if I'm a retailer, if I feel I still have to offer free shipping, fine. You want the pickup option? Save 15%. The reality is you can afford it anyway, because it's coming out of your loss budget that you're planning for anyway. It's going to be a safer transaction. It's going to be easier. You're going to have less loss. Give the benefit to the customer, at least short term, to get the behavior changed, right? Amazon, I find, is a master of this, is that they'll absorb an impact short term because they know the long-term value far exceeds the investment, and that's how they see it short term. And if more retailers would take advantage of that opportunity, yeah, it might kind of suck for like the next year. And it's not even saying you're going to have losses. You just don't necessarily get to benefit from those revenue dollars, of that discount dollars that you're holding on to. But it's like, you should be able to move the needle in some of your other buckets. But a year from now, when customers now feel that pickup is a great alternative, you can start to nudge and shift and adjust the offer. You know what I mean? So that maybe now it's not a discount, it's free, and the ship to home is $5 or $4, which further incents them to just pick up anyway.
Yeah, and
Do you think
Jennifer.
you'll ever get to that point though?
Well, so Jennifer dropped in the comment, like, hey, she travels a lot, so for her, safe delivery even at the same cost is valid. And the point I was going to make is buy online, pick up in store. That is happening every day. So I do think that we can get there because there is a benefit to getting it yourself, or else no one would buy online, pick up in store. So and that's a big element of what we're doing. And if we could just buy online, pick up in store and get that same adoption on the parcel locker, we would really move the needle
Oh,
on some of this.
for sure. But I mean, look, FedEx and UPS combined have got like 160 billion, 170 billion in volume. They're a delivery service. There is a lot of people who choose come to home first versus pickup. And I mean, I agree with you. I'm a fan of pickup. I don't think it's executed to its full capability. I think that there's lots of other opportunities for it. I even love pickup about to Jennifer's point. Hey, I'm in a different market. Send it there. I'll pick it up there. I don't even have to worry about it. So I think that there's lots of creative ways to use it. I think it's super valuable. But the massive majority is in the ship to home, ship to me expectation,
Well,
right?
the other
And
the other problem is the inventory of it as well. Like if you're going to ship to a location, how long are you going to hold on to it before you start charging the customer too? So like,
well,
hey, you're
or
going to deliver to the store. Oh, I'm going to
well,
take a month to
or
pick it
even
up.
like
Right?
holding to it, for example, because a parcel locker, it's like, hey, I actually need that stuff to turn. It's not either helpful for me
Mhm.
either that someone leaves something in there
Yeah.
for 5 days, because now I can't use it for how many other transactions, right? So there's definitely some complexity there to it, but I do think the majority of people that are using the FedEx and the UPS services, if they want to look for some type of diversification, I know that's one thing we wanted to talk about was how do you start to change things and what do you start to do differently? It really will come to the point that you have to broaden your horizon. You know what I mean? Like you're right now, UPS and FedEx as an example, they are the de facto like one-stop shops. Like if you really want everything, you really don't want to think about it, and you just want to ship from one or two inventory orgs out to wherever, that's going to be really hard to replicate. If you want to move to a regional model, if you want to start getting different ways to connect with your customers, you're going to have to bring on more than one or two people. Like that's just the reality. I mean, these guys have invested, hundreds of billions of dollars. They're massive organizations. Their infrastructure is honestly beyond impressive. Just no one thinks about it.
Yeah.
Amazon can compete with them now in the continental U.S. and Canada, for example. And there's definitely providers in other parts of the world that do really well. But for as great as all of the regional carriers are, there's nobody that has the infrastructure that these guys have.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about risks of Network 2.0 and Network of the Future. One of the big risks that I'm interested to see how it goes is on the labor side. On the UPS side of things, we've got, this Teamsters agreement is only good for 5 years. That's going to go by in the blink of an eye. And we've already seen a little kind of bait and switch, right? Like, sure, we're going to send more shore post volume to the Teamsters drivers. And then there's a new service, Ground Advantage, where a lot of the USPS volume is going instead of SurePost. So that's going to be a point of contention, I believe, in the next labor negotiation. And then on the FedEx side, they've always had this independent contractor model, which has always been a little suspect, at least in the eyes of the Teamsters, who would love to bring all of the FedEx drivers into their fold. Any thoughts on, how, if FedEx will avoid unionization and how that might play into some of the decisions they make?
I think labor is going to be a problem for everybody. I think John recently posted one of his posts about the union workers for gig workers in Hamilton, Ontario, that kind of were unionizing. And it's I think labor across the board is going to be a problem for a lot of different people because it's hard to do, right? And it's becoming harder to make it profitable. So they're squeezing the drivers, and at the same time, they're posting all these great profits. And these drivers are going, well, it's not really worth it for us, right? And I'm sure John, I wanted to jump in because John, I know, is going to have some really good
Oh, I just
position on this.
unions. Look, personally for me, like through my career, when I was managing a union, I actually think that the worst thing that any business can do is focus on the management union divide, right? Like the reality is the paycheck, like everybody gets the same like it's all UPS, for example, from the management side and from the worker side. So I think that really focusing on the divide is terrible. Like I really, really feel that you're only hurting yourself day in and day out. But I agree that labor is going to be a huge issue, because now that, just to your point, that they're in such a rich agreement, especially UPS, they've made it wildly clear that they're focusing on consolidation and automation, which basically is like, hey, we're getting smaller and we're going to do more with less. That just automatically gets the reaction of being like, okay, so now I have to fight for everybody. I have to fight for those jobs. Because that's the responsibility of the union, right? Like that's their mandate, is to really create, on top of safe working conditions and fair pay and all that, is to really keep the jobs, right? Like to have
Mhm.
people there. So I think, unfortunately, it's going to create a very, very adversarial um situation for UPS. I don't see how you're going to be doing 5 years of massive consolidation and automation and not have a big battle that comes back around.
You don't think the FedEx drivers are going to be like, hey, I like that model better. It seems more secure with all the challenges in labor, and FedEx workers are going to be the ones looking at the UPS model as a more sound model?
It depends. It's interesting because, like, their ground kind of uses the same DSP style model, right? So that Amazon kind of uses, like, is essentially the same concept. The reality is that the businesses that are the delivery business that actually are hiring and employing all the drivers, they probably are far more resistant to it. And the interesting thing with, like, a DSP style model is that whether people do it or not, it does provide the opportunity for people to treat their individual drivers and their individual business differently. You know what I mean? When it comes to working hours, shifts, expectations, fair pay, all of these things. I do think you're right, though. I think that the delivery industry in general is probably going to see more and more of this, because the reality is you're seeing everybody selling on discount and not selling on the value of what the service is. So the Uber Eats thing in Hamilton, which, like, nobody hears about, you can't even find it in the news. um Imagine, like, unionizing while they're doing, sort of meal deliveries. They have the choice to log in or log out, but it's just because of the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of these models have created situations where it's like they don't pay for the waste. Sure, I'll pay you to do the delivery. I'm not paying you to wait at the restaurant. I'm not paying you for that congestion in the street. I'm not paying you for the customer not, acknowledging or making a claim. So it's like it gets really challenging when everybody is trying to discount, the rates, and they're trying to throw volume at it, but there's only so much volume that can be done, before people are just realistically out of time.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting.
What
And
do you
and
think from
Matt,
your UPS perspective?
and
Sorry.
Matt made a good point. Like, UPS may not be the only delivery company dealing with the labor issues over the next 5 years, whereas historically, they've been the ones that had to bear the bigger brunt there. And there may be a coming home to roost in the FedEx and gig worker and regionals as well. But Matt, I cut you off.
No, no, no. I was just saying that I would like to hear your perspective just from your UPS back in the day era. Like, what would you see from the internal workings, from the engineers, how they see it as, what would they think of FedEx adopting their model?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think from a management point of view at UPS, what would still be um the way people might perceive it is, hey, I just want a level playing field. Like, there's undue burden on us at UPS because we're the Teamsters and FedEx is operating the same business model as us, but not under the same constraints, and that's not fair. And it's actually kind of amazing what UPS has been able to achieve with having a way higher labor rate. And maybe there's something to that if we pay our drivers more, if we create a long-term relationship with them, if we bring them into the fold of the corporation, they'll provide better service. And that will translate into customer loyalty. That will translate into growth and business in the long term. right? So like I would hate to see UPS to get too far away from that mentality. The service is our last name mentality. But then you've also got FedEx who, you know, they're like, hey, I can't operate two networks anymore, right? Like they've had the benefit of honestly having that waste, and that waste is built on the backs of drivers that are paid a lot less. And the market's not sustaining that either anymore. And so I'm glad to see them turn that around. But then how those savings translates into how we treat our drivers, and the way they protect themselves is to treat their drivers really well, or all of the folks that work for them. And we'll just see if they're able to do that, because you know it's fully published and acknowledged what UPS get paid. So here's the same job under the same conditions. You know, FedEx is going to have a choice to make, and then that will determine the labor climate, I believe.
So that makes a really interesting point though, right? Because now you have UPS and FedEx, and this is something that, you know, if you're a regional carrier especially, have to start thinking about, right? Because Amazon is really clear, right? Everyone talks about Amazon and the flywheel and like all of the other things, right? And Amazon has advantages these guys don't even come close to having when you're talking about advertising and warehousing and all kinds of stuff that they do really like, you know, at massive scale. UPS and FedEx are both also expanding out their ecosystem, right? FedEx FedEx is getting right into, and my Google turned on as it thought I was talking to it. Um, FedEx is getting into a little bit more of a tech play, right? Offering more platform tools, e-commerce tools that they're trying to, you know, entice shippers with, for example, working with Microsoft. And then to your point though about labor and quality and things like that, UPS is focusing on shifting their customer base, right? Not just looking for that individual sort of parcel to home or really, you know, staying in that space in a large degree, getting into small and medium business service, getting into healthcare. Healthcare, I think, is a great space. To your point, if you have a labor force that is maybe a little bit more costly, but you feel that you can say, guys, like, look, we're good to pay, but like we want to get into some of these other areas that are either a little bit more white glove, high touch, sensitive, that becomes a much easier conversation to have when you're not then also trying to grind someone down, for example, at the lowest possible labor rate. And it's interesting to see them now starting to really focus on how much they're going to broaden out their services, um, and not just rely on the fact that like, hey, we're just, you know, we're just delivery carriers, we're just
Who,
parcel carriers.
it's like that question, like who would rather not send that Rolex with UPS or FedEx or some gig worker? You're gonna pick probably the UPS because you know that quality of the driver is gonna be a little bit higher than the rest of them, and it's a little bit more of that white glove. So I'll be curious if they start venturing more into that luxury brand niche as well, not only the healthcare, because it also takes that little bit of you're hauling vaccines or any other medicine. It's really high value, and you can sell that easily. You don't want to be selling that with a gig worker at Amazon, because to them they're making $5, and you know $1,000 is huge.
Yeah. And you know, another thing that UPS is doing in terms of this diversifying, which they talked about in their quarterly earnings, was cross-border from Mexico, right? So we have reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, all of the shoring. But then we also have folks that are bringing stuff into the West Coast, moving it inbound to Mexico, and then fulfilling e-commerce just over the border. And UPS is really focused on making that cross-border transaction smooth. And they're investing in digital, they're investing in technology for that customs clearance piece, to remove any barriers that might be there to really take advantage. And even if the de minimis gets lowered from $700, like there's still a lot of room in there, right? Like even if we reduced it to $100, all of the Shein and Temu are still going through.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know, and there are other businesses able to take advantage of that, small to medium sized businesses that are doing this. In fact, I'm speaking at two different conferences, or moderating panels at two conferences over the next 2 months, and this is the topic on both of them. So like it's an interesting play for UPS, that more typical ground carrier, to be making a differentiator in.
Yeah, and the funny thing with that, and that's an area too, right? Because what I think often people underestimate is how quickly some of these large organizations can have impact, right? Like if Amazon, if UPS, if FedEx or Walmart or any of these guys decide all of a sudden something is attractive enough as an option and they start going after it, because to your point about the imports, sure, they've always been there, they've always facilitated those things, but now if it becomes something that they're going to stay highly focused on, right? It's like all of the other carriers that all of a sudden have been raving about, hey, we built a facility, we can do this, we can do that. And it's like, you can, but now you're going to have UPS and their $90 billion a year starting to look at your lunch and being like, no, we need that too, because to your point, these public companies have to continually to find avenues for growth and to show shareholder value. So anything that starts to become really popular, um, takes hold. And I see there's a comment they're talking about reducing the de minimis to $1. It's funny. I think Canada is like $15. I think ours is like super low. We're very similar to some of the other countries that way. I think oddly enough, China's is also in the $10 to $20 like equivalent range. Whether it would be reduced to $1, I often think that most of the time it would probably just be tiered limits that you can get X amount of packages through rather than trying to manage some kind of like declared value. Um, yeah, there's comments too about it hurting small businesses, which is interesting. It's a very polarizing issue, but I definitely think that there's opportunity to tier out these types of things, and then how do you work that in? What are your guys' thoughts then? So UPS and FedEx, huge orgs, tons of money, shifting their network, but still have a lot of their control of their infrastructure, right? Which is becoming more and more of a huge asset for them, right? Matt, you made the comment about moving stuff across, like there's no one. These two guys have only like 1,200 planes and stuff like that. Like nobody else has 1,200 planes that's really moving packages this way. So what are some real alternatives, or what would be some suggestions? For example, it's like we see what these guys are doing. I don't know if I really want to how much I want to continue to work this way. Like what are some other things that retailers or maybe e-commerce brands can think of, because a lot of them are going to be struggling with some of these changes, because it's great to have all of these automations and stuff, but they're also making it very clear that quality of revenue and price is going to become less in an area where they necessarily want to compete, and they're going to try to compete in services or alternative style opportunities to have a broader portfolio, sort of selling more on value than just on low price.
I was just gonna jump in quickly because I know Jess probably has far more take on this than I do, and not my strongest suit. But like this is the problem with not the problem. This is the best part about FedEx and UPS is because they have that end-to-end solution, and it's hard to compete with that. So either A, you got to go really regionalized, and you have a whole bunch of different vendors that you're going to be working with, and a whole bunch of different DCs that is not centralized. You might have to integrate a whole bunch of different systems. And if you're a retailer, that might be not worth it, and that's why you go with the FedEx or the UPS. But it's also a good opportunity for a bigger other carrier, like we talked about before the call, is like DHL coming in. Maybe it's the opportunity now for them to use their fiscal abilities to help these regional carriers to compete and able to provide a solution in the North American context and unify it. Well, they'll be like, hey, I'm going to drop this off at a regional carrier in New York and California, and you got to just be connected to the DHL system, and they'll be able to see it across these multiple different platforms. And I think that's where a lot of regional players can really come in, is start partnering with other bigger players to help provide a fuller solution to some of the Fortune 500 companies, because it's hard for a small retailer to compete with to get a better deal than FedEx and UPS.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what I love is Pandion, right? Like, I'm so glad that they've gotten that influx of like $40 million. I want to see what they can do. This network aggregator, as an alternative for smaller to medium-sized shippers to be able to more fully diversify, because again, there's a lot of carrier rationalization going on, whereas some folks like popped up to 12 different carriers during the pandemic, and are removing carriers at a fairly rapid clip. Or you fulfill through a ShipBob and then you leverage their network. where they have the volume to really diversify the carrier network. Sort of network aggregators like that, I'm interested to see how they provide the opportunity, because small to medium sized shippers can't maintain 4 fulfillment centers across North America. That's too big of an ask. There is a point where that starts to make sense and awesome, but there's a point where you're chasing something that's going to cost you more money than the benefit that you're going to get. And finding that sort of Goldilocks moment is one of the challenges in the industry. So yes, you should have diversified carriers, but you may not be able to go direct to all of the carriers, right? So you could have your one big contract with UPS or FedEx and a network aggregator, and play with maybe Amazon, or OnTrack, who's got a presence on the West Coast and the East Coast. Some of these more bigger footprint regionals, and then taking advantage where the density is, right? If you have the opportunity to really leverage a regional that's like in your backyard, I would say that's a thing to explore. That's a complexity that might be worth it, especially if you plan to grow.
Oh yeah, big time. I think I think the other thing is too is that you'll hear everybody talk about things like 80/20, and everyone, whether they how publicly they do it, everyone will tell you like their best accounts are the ones that add the highest value to their business and stuff like that. And look, that's just the reality. Like everybody has that. I don't think enough brands and retailers really take advantage of enough these days. I think the e-commerce kind of expectation was that, like, because you can ship and sell everywhere, you should ship and sell everywhere all at the same time. And I think that is something that a lot of people would benefit from reevaluating a little bit. Not that you don't necessarily sell everywhere, but it's like, it's more, how do you get more value out of the areas where you can do really well, where you're really dominant, where you happen to be really popular. There's a ton of commentary going on right now around social selling and communities and stuff like that. Well, that inherently is going to create different types of demand patterns, different types of product wants in much more localized areas. If you do really well and you just dominate in New York, great. Even if you're using UPS and FedEx, if you're shipping from like a smaller New York facility for them right back into the New York market, you're going to do better off than if you're shipping from LA into the New York market on your transactions. But if you can strategically find, and to your point, you don't necessarily need to have these massive inventory orgs with all kinds of inventory duplication, whatever. It's like, where do I get the most impact? Like, what cities or regions, what SKUs are the ones that really connect most with those? Maybe you have your top 20, 30, 500 SKUs, whatever it might be for the type of business that you run, in a much more local environment where you can get better value out of like your bread and butter sales. And yeah, you can still reach other customers using a FedEx, a UPS, USPS, or even Amazon as they continue to expand out their broader sort of carrier service offering for all of that tail spend sort of, or the tail delivery sort of activity, right? I think that's the type of strategies that more retailers and more e-commerce brands would benefit from these days, because everybody is looking for quality of revenue, which i.e. translates right to your profitability, right?
Yeah. Um, let's talk a little bit about Amazon, because we haven't, like, we've got Network of the Future, Network 2.0 in the with the lens of Amazon coming in as a common carrier. What are your thoughts? Like, so they're coming in, I think they're making a price play. It's just ground right now. They're not offering that Prime 2-day service, I don't think. And their network needs a lot of work in order to do this at scale. What a fulfillment center looks like, and what like a sort and seg facility looks like in the hub and spoke model, very different things. Any sort of high level thoughts on how Amazon will play into this?
I would be more curious to see what Walmart would be coming behind, because you don't hear about it. And I think they have a service that they can offer, especially with their store locations that are everywhere. It really becomes a far more complex play than what Amazon can offer. And I wouldn't be surprised if they already don't have something in the works along those lines. Amazon's like all things, there's a lot of buzz around it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be profitable. Look at their recent closure of their was it the grocery store, the Amazon Go. It's just didn't work out. So time will tell. But they're competing against FedEx and UPS, and they've pulled out from the Amazon model. I mean, they pulled out from Amazon because of the competition. So we'll see what they're able to do. But I'm more excited to see if Walmart can do, or another big retailer, maybe like Best Buy, come into a play and become a different service provider than just electronics and retail.
Well,
Yeah,
Matt,
that's
so there
interesting.
was a recent Wall Street Journal like video thing. I'm find it and I'm gonna drop it in the comments after we're done being live. But Walmart really saying, oh hey, we're gonna take a bit of the square footage that we have in all of these stores in like amazing areas and start to convert them. And Target's got a little
Bro,
bit of that too. And the Wall Street Journal focused on Target and Walmart and what they're doing in that space. To your exact point.
So I think
like in
that's
Canada,
interesting.
Canadian Tire.
Go ahead, finish.
Go ahead, John. I was going to say that in Canadian terms, because some of these places are like the most remote areas, other than postal services, besides post offices, it's some of these old legacy retailers. In Canada, it's Canadian Tire. They have some of the best placements of stores, Home Hardware, because they're in remote areas that a lot of people don't go to. They can really change their services and provide a logistical support because they're already delivering in there. What's another position of not providing a logistical support and using their discounts, even with UPS and FedEx, by saying, hey, we're out in St. John's, Newfoundland, or we're out in Maine at our store. We'll bring it back to a more centralized location for you. Can we get cost savings by creating density for you in these areas that you need help with by adding more product together?
Yeah, I agree, and it's funny. So I'm more of an Amazon fan, maybe just in the sense that I think that from a culture perspective, as an organization, I think that they're one of the best at their longer term thinking, and they're quite willing to invest a lot more upfront. They're not saying that they're not concerned with things like their profitability and their shareholder revenue, but they've demonstrated time and time again that they're much more willing than some of the other larger retailers, for example, to build towards the future. So I think Amazon is going to get a lot of attention. One, just because they've earned it in terms of trust. Like, you don't very often see Amazon say they're going to do something and then not do it. They might have failures, to Matt's point about like the just walk out tech and the way they'd originally positioned that, but they also tried it. They put it right out there. And they put their effort behind making it work. Okay, it failed and whatever, they're going to go to something else, but they actually get things done. They also have all of the in-house expertise and capability when it comes to industrial engineering, technology, like, the understanding of the marketplace. And they have the brand recognition, like the logo, to give them a lot more credibility. So I think that they're going to be able to definitely make as much of an impact as they want. But I also wouldn't be surprised for them to be like, well, no, we don't need everything because we've got a lot of everything. Like, what are those client or customer profiles that would make sense, right? Because if I'm Amazon and I really want to disrupt like a FedEx and a UPS, I'm going to start trying to hurt them and go for the type of customers that actually drive their profit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to find a way to really make myself sticky for those customers. Walmart's interesting too. So Walmart's been making a lot of really cool innovations in terms of it. I think that and I share this a lot, that I think that they're the only traditional retailer that is really doing things in a very innovative and forward thinking way. So I agree. I think that they also have a lot of opportunity with their store and their network nodes and stuff like that, the way that they operate, to really make a strong impact. Um, and they both, Amazon and Walmart both have enough money. If they really want to make the investments, they can. I think it just comes down to, logistics can't be a side hustle. It has to really get the attention that it needs. So if they're both willing to really invest in those new capabilities, I think both of them could make a significant impact.
Yeah, and that's a great statement. So we've got about 5 minutes before we run up against an hour. Clearly we could just talk all day, but we shouldn't. So maybe we'll go around and wrap it up. But I think John, like, that's a mic drop moment. Like, logistics is not a side hustle. This is a thing that you do. And when we're bringing in partners, we want to bring in partners that aren't side hustling. That's going to be important. So I think, again, this is fully in alignment with most of what I talk about. The network of the future is the network that's taking care of the people doing the work, the folks on the ground. There's a lot of automation that we can bring in that can enhance the employee experience, and the organization that focuses most on that will, I think, net the greatest dividends from that investment. But I don't see us losing. Like, FedEx is going to be here, UPS is going to be here, Amazon's going to be here, and the regionals are going to stay in play. How the regionals maximize their impact is, I think, the biggest question mark. But I do think all of these players are here to stay in the North American market. And I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
I was going to say, I think it's an interesting time for logistics in general as an industry, because again, it's becoming far more sexier for the common person to be interested how things are being delivered. And we didn't touch upon it here, but there's a whole sustainability aspect of it. People are more ingrained of how it's all being done. That's really becoming a part of the conversation every day. And that's where we're hearing a lot more about FedEx, UPS, DHL, Amazon, and all these other brands. And I think as we're more conscious of how these packages are being delivered, there's going to be a sustainability conversation around that's going to grow as well. So not only how is this package being delivered, is there going to be an offset for a lot of these packages if they're being delivered? Do I have a foot option to offset some of these carbon footprints that are becoming far more aware? Maybe I don't want it delivered by plane because I don't want that carbon footprint. I can wait a week for it to be delivered by train as an option for a lot of these things. And I think that market is slowly turning into that. So you can't just have a partner that's just focused on the lowest price, the quickest way to go about it, because they're not going to be profitable here for the future. You got to partner up with these people that are looking forward ahead. What is the next trend of what the consumer wants from their logistics provider? Not just that delivery, not just drop the rate to get the freight kind of mentality. It really is that fuller solution. And the retailers have to really look at it too. It's, yeah, they did lose during COVID. Yeah, it had to be adjusted, prices to go up. Yes, they are leveling out, but let's look forward to what's going to happen next. And part of that is that e-commerce question mark is not every provider out there is able to do it. You're going to need some regional partners. How are you going to help those regional partners grow and get to that product they need to? That might be a little bit of hurt up front, but it's going to develop a better system for everybody.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah. For me, I think my general comment is the same, whether you're a retailer or brand or whether you're a service provider. I think, the changes that you're seeing in the market are showing you 100% that if you want to do something differently, if you want to have a different value proposition, you're going to have to explore different options, right? Competing, to your point, Matt, just on price is going to become increasingly difficult because, let's be real, none of the regional carriers have the money that these guys have. When they're investing in massive platforms and they're investing in massive automation, and you start throwing Amazon in there and potentially a Walmart and all kinds of others, like trying to be a low cost provider and competing on price it's going to be the fastest way you can blow up your business. So it's two things, right? If I'm a retailer, I'm going to have to really appreciate, for example, what's my transactional volume, and then what's my more, let's call it like fan volume or value added volume, or what do I want to do differently, or how do I start separating my activity? If I'm going to be selling to more communities, if I want to connect better with the people purchasing from me, I may not want to leverage at least all of the time or for 100% of my volume that very transactional, impersonal brown box at your doorstep, like I'm kind of like gun and run type service. And the reality is, for Amazon, UPS, and FedEx, or whoever else that's doing it at the scale they do, massive investment, massive streamlining of activity means standards, and standardization means uniformity, which I'm a fan of. Don't get me wrong. I help a lot of people with that, but it also means that, you're really producing a certain type of product really, really well and at a low cost. So if you want to do things differently, you're going to have to explore other options. And then if you're that service provider, how do you actually sell on more value, right? The delivery is expected, the fulfillment is expected, tracking a package, like for everyone that keeps reaching out to me telling me that their platform's so great because they live track the package, like everybody does these days, guys, like everybody's doing it, so it's like, what are you going to do differently from a value perspective to catch a retailer's attention. And that's probably the biggest thing. In the same way that, we all write a lot of content, the reality is attention is the economy of tomorrow. And it's like, if you can capture that attention from a retailer and you can help them capture the attention of the consumer, you are going to be in a better place than just focusing on the lowest cost, because only one person can ever really be the lowest cost. And that race to the bottom is very, very tough.
Yeah. And part of that part of the differentiation is, sorry, Matt, is, to Matt's point, is the sustainability. And Douglas put a thing that if your parent company is in the EU or UK, like, it's a big deal to be able to minimize your carbon footprint. And that's going to be a conversation that's going to drive a lot of this network 2.0 network of the future. Matt, take us home. You're the last one.
I'm the last one. I'm just going to say that attention piece, John, I think you hit it like a nail on the head. It really does come down to that. You really need to capture the attention of doing something different. And it's hard work. Being different is not easy, and providing value is not easy. It's not just throwing up a price and a tracking link and be like, hey, I'm doing something different. It takes a little bit more forethought and a little bit more differentiator than the rest to really capture that attention. And I'll leave it on that, guys.
All right. Thank you guys all for joining us and sticking with us for the whole hour. We had a lot of fun. We'll be back next month. If you have topic suggestions, let us know. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys.